Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. If you watching this later, that you did very well. I'm Daniel Joslin. I'm a member of the IFLA Climate Action Group, and I'm your host today. So I will be managing who's speaking, and I will also be taking your questions and giving them on to our speakers. I'd like to give a warm welcome to our speakers, Michael, Laura, and Haris. And I pass the word to Tamsin, who's a co-chair of the IFLA Climate Action Group, and will introduce and welcome our speakers and guests.
Great, thank you, Daniel. It is my great privilege to open this webinar, All Protocols Observed. For those who might not know, IFLA is the International Federation of Landscape Architects. I'll pop the link into the chat just in case you'd like to go to the website, and there's lots of really great material on the website, so I do recommend it. We are, the Climate Action Group is a group of 10 passionate professionals located around the world. We are in South America, we're in Europe, we're in Cape Town, South Africa. And our passion is to turn landscape architecture into climate action. I'd like to also acknowledge Anush Ruti, who is our technical support, sitting behind the scenes. Thank you so much for helping us to put all the back end stuff together. It's much appreciated. Just a bit of context about the CAG. We are one of 18 working groups that IFLA established at the beginning of last year. And the working groups are aligned to the SDGs. So it's quite a lot, but we are the Climate Action Group. There are a number of activities that we undertake as part of the group, and one of them are the webinars, which have been led, the conceptual development and the organization has been led by Carlos in Colombia, who is a guest this afternoon, and has done an astounding job in pulling together. At this stage, this is the 5th webinar. We started off with monsoon intelligence. We then went to best practice for nature-based solutions, and then there was territories of care. And then the last one was landscapes in motion, rethinking landscape architecture education for a changing world. And the way that we've organized and conceptualized these webinars is to connect them to particular regions, and that gives us a really nice focus and lens through which to then look at a particular topic. And there was a lot of chatter in our little group about what we should call the session today. What did we land on, Daniel? I lost track of what the poll said. There we go. So this is today's webinar, Europe Rocks on Climate. We literally had a WhatsApp poll on which title to go with. So very collaborative, very engaged, very interactive, and I'm super excited to hear from our presenters. So I'm going to tune out now because you are here to hear from Haris and Lara. And sorry, we had a last minute change on the lineup. And if for those of you who might not know what a pedagogy is, come on, Daniel, you might need to give us a little bit of a definition for the less academic practitioners on the call.
My Greek spelling stayed in Versailles, I think. I'm sorry. Welcome to the dyslexic landscape architect. Yes. So
right. I think we can hand over to Laura now.
Yes, I give a quick introduction to Laura. I'm very happy to see you, Laura. We've been colleagues for a while in the Netherlands, although not simultaneously at the same university. I was before you at Delft, and you came to Delft later, and I was in Wageningen at the time, but I always followed your very inspiring work, especially also this work, which for us seemed very relevant for the Climate Action Group, because you were dealing with the youngest, and when we talk about sustainability and about the next generations, that's exactly what it is about. So I'm very happy to have your presentation and you joining us from your holiday, actually, which we will not reveal the location of.
Thank you, Daniel, for the kind and warm introduction. Let me share the screen. Just a moment. Is it visible? Is it okay? Is it visible?
Yes,
Looks
Laura,
good to
it's
me.
perfect. Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So this presentation is actually Playful Pedagogy's Climate Change as a Game. It's a presentation that will introduce the Comenius Fellowship results for didactical and pedagogical innovation. It's a sort of invitation to develop a positive attitude and an emotional and artful knowledge in contact with nature to tackle the climate transition. So starting from exploring different forms of play, the project aims to educate and engage younger generations in climate change issues. Because today, younger generation will face ongoing changes in the landscape throughout their lives. So the question where can we create consciousness on how climate change will modify landscapes and cities? Can we involve children and university students in co-designing the landscape considering climate change? So this diagram represents the life of a person in relation to temperature change and green gas emissions in the last centuries. So here you see a child born in 1950, in 1980, and in 2020. So a child born today in the Netherlands in 2020 will experience a higher average temperature at the end of his life, which means that he will face a completely different landscapes. What was very much interest was to tackle the climate transition in a different way, so in a sort of positive attitude. And we started talking about play. And play, I was very fascinated by the etymology because play means dance or emotion. So it's a sort of spontaneous and purposeless behavior. But also play can also be described as a game. And the game, on the other hand, is very linked to rationality. It involves rules. It comes from the old English gammon. So there is a rational side of the game. I really like the idea of play as a dance, since the playful attitude is something that characterizes young humans since their childhood. And play is something that you also find in the animal world. These are two cubs playing, and even plants are playing. These are young sunflowers playing at the beginning of a lifetime. So if we go back to the pedagogy of playing landscape, I would like to, to show you a little bit what was the role of the project and how did I start. It started with a grant from Johannes Comenius, and Johannes Comenius actually was very interesting figure because he was the father of modern education. He published several books, and in particular the Orbis Sensalius Pictus, where for the first time he introduced several educational concepts and innovations, including the first pictorial textbook for children. In the history, of course, most of you know Maria Montessori, that was the mother of what is called the cosmic education. And in her view, of course, the ecological view was playing a crucial role. These are, for example, some agricultural works at the House of the Child in Rome, where children learned how to cultivate the land and to be in contact with nature. Another inspiring work for me was the Bernard Lassus book in the late 60s. It was entitled Joux. And Bernard Lassus provided a sheet of paper with a red dot and asked people to draw a landscape. The intention was to go to the root of imagination. And so people actually sketched around and many things came out. In the 60s, many radical pedagogies tried to use art and play to go beyond the limits of the single disciplines. Here, for example, we are the faculty of Valparaiso, or think about also the work of Anna and Lores Alfrin in the Driftwood Village. A work that included even dance. This is, for example, the planetary dance that is being performed in hundreds of locations around the world. Segni Mossi is instead a research project initiated by a visual artist and a choreographer to investigate the interaction between dance and graphic science with children, because play is a dance. This is another project by Roberto Pasini, the Symbiotic Matorral installation that was meant to raise awareness of biodiversity loss in Monterey. I found it very interesting because the work was conceived on the Deleuze-Guattari philosophy of becoming animal to remove really the anthropocentric perspective. Children enters the door of imagination and they become an animal. They hear like a rabbit, smell like a bear, see like a coyote. The project of Belinda Tato is based in the Bahamas, in the islands of Exuma, places that will be soon affected by sea level rise. So she gave 2 papers to children, one for dreaming the future, and the other one for what they wanted to change. And many things came out, and they made an origami flowers, and they exhibited all the origami flowers in a sort of art installation where you can see the dreams for the future. So with this background in mind, my Comenius course, Climate Change as a Game, has started in 2023. It was made up with 9 university students from TU Delft, 28 children from a primary school, 10, 12 years old, and then 2 teachers, me and the primary school teacher, plus the parents and also a farmer. We started with a full day seminar focusing on the power of play in its broader meaning. So that means play grammar, education theories, landscape policies, design strategies, and co-design practices with an interdisciplinary group of speakers. Dreaming the future with children can really foster the emotional knowledge to tackle the climate transition and help shape landscapes of change. And during the seminar, I asked to draw the dot of the changing landscape, which was a sort of interpretation of the 1960s game inspired by Lassus. And as you can see, many things came out. The soil in its bacteria, the sea with the sun, fishes and wind farms. So the climate crisis will change if we can reverse the negative imagery and transform it into positive and emotional actions. The course had been structured into 3 parts. The first part, reading and playing the landscape, and it was done on site. The second part, co-designing the landscape, it was done in class. And the third part, co-creating the landscape, was done again on site. So exploring and playing and reading the landscape was done on site in Delft. We worked on water and soil interactions, which are crucial in the age of climate change. We worked in a site in Delft where the soil plays a crucial role in climate change issues for the carbon cycle. This is a cartography of the beginning of the 18th century. On the left, you have Delft, and in the middle, you have this black hole, which is actually the study site we considered. Like most places in the Netherlands, these were peat extraction sites that transformed into polders. Peat was extracted for burning, and this has produced significant CO2 emissions. What we forget is that peatlands store vast amounts of carbon, twice as much carbon as all the world's forest. So you understand that by conserving, protecting, and restoring peatlands globally, we can reduce emissions. So it's very much important. The polder today has been transformed into a rural area with biodynamic farming and a natural resort. We are 5 meters below sea level. Here you see the transformation on the sites through the centuries, and you see the 5 meters. And no peat has been left at the moment, only clay soil, and that's why water has accumulated here. Water is highly managed in the summer and in the winter. It's a farm that adopts a 6-year rotation for achieving an healthy soil, and mowing and grazing management. And also, they have an important approach in maintaining enclosed systems whereby livestock feed and manure do not enter or leave the area. Mowing is a method that creates a mosaic of plots with different lengths in vegetation. Here you see the cows, but also insects came back in this biodynamic farming, as well as the avifauna. So we started with 30 kids on site, and we asked them a very simple question to explore and read the landscape there. What if you were a bunny, a cow, or a bird? Which plants would you collect and eat? So they started exploring with this little crown on top, and they collected the vegetation. We discussed with that. They made some artful installation, and we tried to understand actually what they perceived in being a cow or being another animal. The second group started working instead on soil, and in particular soil permeability, and so on soil and water. They started collecting the soil, and the kids were given some instruction with bottle game instruction, and they placed the soil, and they filtered the water to understand the different soil permeability. And it was very much interesting that they experimented somewhat on site, and also they gave back the water to the lake through an artistic element of it, enjoying a little bit of what they experimented. The second phase was dealing with the co-designing the landscape. This time we were in class. We provided a kit of the area, sort of diorama to play, and with some elements, and we tried to understand what the kids were doing. We also tried to understand the attitude of kids on climate change with red dot of the climate crisis and the green dot of the climate hope. And many things came out which were pretty interesting for us. At the same time, we work in co-designing the landscape with the farmer, and of course, my students had to make a plan, a master plan of that. The third phase was co-creating the landscape. And so university students made a game installation site, taking into account the inputs from the co-designing phase. This last event was called the Whispering Wilderness, and we focused on the role of biodiversity to talk about the soil carbon cycles, emissions, and sequestration. The installation showed the living organism in the soil, on the ground, and in the air, using almost 100 wood sticks with animal shapes arranged according into a circle, a square, and a triangle. And this was the path that the people had to go, and we arrived and into the forest, which was in the nearby of the polders areas. So children, teachers, parents, farmers, and invisible living animals and organisms were playing to imagine possible biodiversity and soil carbon futures for the climate transitions. With the help of a game card and booklet, children had to recognize living organisms and learn about the influence on the climate for emissions and carbon storage. This was the booklet with the free installations. And in particular, I want to show you the Under Our Feet installation, which was this circle, because it was made up with us talking about what was below the ground. And soil biodiversity is the variety of life that exists within the soil, including bacteria, fungi, earthworms, termites. Just to make you an example, that a teaspoon of topsoil contains a vast range of different species, and we can actually think about that up to 6 million of microorganisms in a teaspoon of topsoil. So under our feet was very much important. And also on site, you can see and sense what was below the ground. This is the path of a mole, and this helps to aerate the soil and allows it to absorb more oxygen, which benefits the roots of the surrounding plants. It also loosens the soil, allowing plants' roots to grow more freely, which is especially desirable for root vegetation. And these are the kids playing, and my students becoming teacher. And even a cow showed up in the installation. And the other teacher was asking, what living organism is this? And at a certain point, we went to the forest because taking inspiration from Rousseau painting, The Dream, another part of the installation took place in the nearby forest. Rousseau had never seen these tropical landscapes. He only used the power of imagination. And likewise, The Dream in the Forest displayed the animals' evolution that children imagined beforehand in class. They imagined the fish with legs for drought periods, or the cow that self-stores CO2 emissions not to influence the climate, or the rabbit evolution as a butterfly to escape in the air and become a pollinator. And of course, the cow with the long, long legs for floods period. TU Delft came also to visit us, and TV, and we ended the morning with a wild choreography, a sort of dance, where children had to dance imitating some of the animals. We placed the music in the jungle, and we started being very tidy, but then everything became very much chaotic with this kind of animal dance. And this wild choreography and its movements were really making sure that plays was a dance. This was the wild team that was part with me. And what was very important is that rather than delivering a project, the course was a process. Better, I would say, a project of multiple and mutually interlaced processes. The main innovation was my students became the children teachers, and these become actually becoming a teacher implies gaining empowerment, learning how to transmit knowledge, but also they learn from the landscape, and also they learn from the farmer. And then the children also became the teachers of their parents. So it became a sort of virtuous cycle of knowledge that everybody taught to somebody else. Even the structure was peculiar because the process was incremental and foreseen a rotation and join different expertise. We started with the 6 speakers, but my students were coming from 3 different sections. So 3 from landscape architecture, 3 from urban design, and 3 from architecture. And in the first phase, was led by landscape architecture students to explore the landscape. The second phase was led by the urban design students, and it was much more dealing with landscape and urban planning. And as a final task was the third phase was led by the architecture students. In this case, we were much more dealing with landscape and architecture composition, modeling, and prototyping. And of course, we were the real animals, were also part of this system. I made some interviews to the children. We gave some survey before and after the installation. And it came out actually that there was a learning process, which was pretty serious, especially dealing with the carbon cycle knowledge. And also to my students, they actually felt a sense of responsibility and commitment. They became actors of change. And even from them, there was actually an expansion of their knowledge, especially in self-learning, tutoring the children, and learning from the colleagues. What about me? I became a sort of director. So the students became actors of change, and me, became a director of this play. My role was to create the conditions for each scene and rehearse the steps to play together. But at a certain point, when the curtains was opening, there was nothing else but letting the dance play take place. So it was actually a very different shift also for pedagogy and for myself. The project ended with the transformation of the temporary installation into a permanent golden spiral evolution that was inspired by the Fibonacci sequence. So rising from the soil, the spiral symbolized the journey from the underground life to the sky, and culminates into a constellation of imagined beings adapted to the future climates. At the center stands, of course, the long-legged cow born from children's imagination to survive floods, embodying hope, harmony, and resilience in a changing world. This is the book that very soon you will find it also for free in open access online. And let me finish the presentation with this quote by Pablo Picasso. Every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once we grow up. Thank you all.
Thanks very much, Laura. Really great presentation. I hope we can discuss it also later all together. Meanwhile, I did my spell checking. It's all right. You really confused me there, everybody. So playful pedagogies, that's how you spell it. And now a little bit of lack of control here. But I'll find out next. Let's go to Michael without me taking too much control of the screen. Empowered by nature, resilience through landscape. Michael, I'm very happy to have you here today. Michael is the director of the Vienna Office of Land, one of 6 offices of land. He's a partner of the principal Andreas Kipar, and I just must say at this point that Andreas Kipar, when he about 2 World Economic Forums ago stepped onto the big world stage and saying, I'm a landscape architect and I can help you solve the climate issue, that was a huge moment of motivation for me, and also my personal motivation to join the IFLA Climate Action Group, and to formulate with my colleagues our motto, landscape architecture is climate action. So Michael told me he completely agrees with that, and I'm curious to see how this will dissolve in the practice of land.
Manel, thank you very much for the moderation. Laura, thank you very much for your first really inspiring input. So I will try also to manage the technique. I hope you can see my screen right now, and I will jump in. As Daniel already mentioned, actually Andreas Kipar should have done this presentation today. Quite short notice. He told me, Michael, can you jump in? And I said, of course, I will give my best, Andreas, to substitute you. So I'm happy to be here, really grateful, to talk about something that I called Empowered by Nature. Resilience through landscape architecture. As already mentioned, I'm the managing partner of the Land Office in Vienna, Austria. I'm also a researcher at the Boku University. And I want to start with a story. And as we know, stories usually start with once upon a time. Once upon a time, cities in the past were understood somehow differently. We moved now in the 1980s, 1990s to Italy in Milano. During this time, a lot of industrial areas actually have been within the city. And slowly but steadily, especially automotive, moved outside of the city. But around 7 to 8 million of square meters of those industrial sites suddenly got free within the urban area. And during this time, the young protagonist, in this case, Andreas Kieper, he moved from Germany to Italy. He studied landscape architecture and afterwards also urbanism. And suddenly, and I think for the first time, the urban cosmos was viewed by a landscape architect, but through the glasses of an urbanist in a different scale. And with this, he started with vision, the vision of the green rays of Milano. This vision basically says that from the center of Milano, outside, there are rays, green rays that grow time by time. It was the start of an informal master plan. Coming to the present now, this is still an informal planning instrument, the Raggi Verdi, that basically lays green rays through the city. I think there are like 7 or 8 rays in total. And on these rays, there are actionable items. Every nature-based solution helps into this network to build this up. And what was formerly Alfa Romeo as a production site suddenly turned into Parco Portello. So this industrial site got transformed from something industrial into a public space with life quality. The same happened to the Maserati production site within the city. Suddenly, this got to become a place where people can play, what we heard before. And the city of the future is more than just traditional urban life. The city of the future is focusing on quality of life. And I am not getting tired to quote Jan Gehl when he said, "First life, then space, then buildings. The other way around never works." And I really believe we, in our profession, we are not merely designers of spaces. And Daniel, here I am connecting to you. We are not merely designers of spaces. We are agents of a nature-positive transformation. And we have a responsibility to go with this transformation. And you can see now this video. It's a map of Milano, the city in Italy I was talking about. In the middle, you find the dome. And you can see that step by step, this master plan over the last 20 years came to fruition. And it's still hanging there in the mayor's office. And you can see like every small puzzle, every stone that we put, every tree that we plant, pays into this bigger master plan. And for me, this was important because during my studies as a trained landscape planner, landscape architect, I somehow was focusing on a small scale, on a small park, on a short time scale as well. And what I learned working with land, what I learned with Andreas Kieper was to think bigger, see the city as a whole cosmos, and also think long term. And why is this important? This is especially important because we live in a new normal. That's absolutely clear for everybody in here. We have floodings, we have landslides, we have droughts, we have heat waves, we have fires. It's an absolutely ecological necessity that we are facing currently. So this is also our responsibility to take action. And nature-related issues are on the top of the list for long-term risks. Even the World Economic Forum put them as a #1 priority. Extreme weather events, biodiversity loss. So we are all part of this ecological transformation. We can be part of it. And the goals are completely clear. We have the SDGs, we have soil strategies, we have nature positive guidelines, and with these frameworks, they actually are for us a call to action. It's not our office saying, we want to do it. No, there is really a higher call to action to work with this. And as I said, the cities were understand different in the past than they are nowadays, because there is a so-called zeitgeist for everything. Also, planning processes always have reflected the conditions of their time. This is a picture of the starting point of the office land in Milano, 1990s. Planning processes in the past were different than they are nowadays. The challenges are different. And maybe not in the past, the planning was more a linear process. You made analysis, you made a design, you went to implementation. Nowadays, we are seeing that we need to go from isolated expertise to networked interdisciplinary planning. And this is also why we involve in our planning projects, not just landscape planners. We need ecologists, we need climate scientists, we need engineers, we need even data scientists. Because nowadays, with this complexity, we can see that we need data scientists, we need language models. That's just a really helpful tool. And one of those is the landscape information modeling, the LIM, with which we are working in our office to also simulate the growth of actions that we are taking. Because of course, on day one, when a tree is planted, its impact is different than 5, 15, or 30 years in the future. And also this is absolutely necessary, especially to decision makers, to make them clear what they get from this nature positive approach. They need to understand that green can help us. On the left, you see this classical image of a thermal infrared camera showing the surface temperature is 30 degrees cooler under the tree than on the asphalt. I call it a quite quantitative scientific approach. On the right side, it's more a qualitative approach. You can see the people feel more comfortable under the shade. And it's really important to see nature as a driver of this change. To tackle challenges of climate, of biodiversity loss, of course, for people. And I was reading recently an article where they were writing, let's go back to nature. And I found it good. It's great. Let's go back to nature. But I found it better to say, let's go forward to nature, because this is the future. And I was reading another quote that really took me, and it took a while to reflect on it and understand it. It was saying that the infrastructure quality of the future will be the landscape. But not just any landscape, but an ecological active and aesthetically pleasing landscape. And ecologically active. And this quotation comes from 1991. And I think it's more contemporary than ever. And this is really inspiring also in the day-to-day work to see that our work matters. And it's important to see also here a shift in paradigm to go from a compensatory model to a transformative model. Of course, the base is to avoid where we make damage to nature. But if this is not possible, to at least reduce and mitigate as much as possible, restore and regenerate, and ideally on the pinnacle, to transform a system-wide change. And this is what we understand under the nature positive approach. And now I just want to jump into a little bit of the work that we are also doing in the office, again in Italy. I don't look now at the urban scale of a city, but of the whole metropolitan area. And here we have 88 interventions in 32 municipalities. So it's a huge regional area actually. And when I zoom into one of the projects that I really like is Cologno Monzese, where we created a public space that not just is beautifully designed and looks great. No, it also adds ecosystem services. It's like 2 hectares big, and we create, like you see in the middle here, these half circles. It's like I call it an amphitheater where people can hang out, relax, spend their time. But also during heavy rain events, this amphitheater can be flooded. And all the surfaces that got paved were used actually with permeable surfaces, so the water can infiltrate through. And you can see here a picture of this amphitheater. And it's, I think, a really nice example of what I also call this multifunctionality of our design. So it's not just anymore design, but also it creates and adds value. And in this case, it's, I think, a really nice project. Another one is Parco dell'Acqua di Sulbiate e Accurzio. Also in this region, it had an intervention area of 5 hectares, where also a natural pond was integrated. Actually, this whole project is a water retention area for a settlement behind. So in case of floodings, that settlement doesn't get flooded, but this really well-designed space can mitigate this risk. And what you can see here of this round pond during the day can be great for the kids to play with the stones behind the water. The parents can sit and spend their time. During heavy rain events, this place can get flooded. And in this case, we said work with nature, not against it. And you can see the picture of the visualization that actually this is pretty much wanted, that this area is able to transform. So that's a really nature positive approach as well in this. Work with nature. And you can see here some pictures during the construction site, during the construction process, and also during the opening. And I remember a client once coming to me and saying, Michael, you landscape architects, you are all liars. And I was like, what do you mean we are liars? I don't know. And he said, you show us your beautiful renders, and then when the project is done, all the trees are super small. And I'm like, yeah, actually, it's a little bit true, because if you look at the rendering, we have these huge trees here already. And when the park is built, you just see the small trees, maximum 2 meters high. And I think it's also really necessary to show this awareness that our green infrastructures, our nature-based solutions, they take time to grow and to enrich their full potential. This is a major key differentiation between gray infrastructure and green infrastructure. And yeah, with the projects that we did in the last 35 years, slowly the trees that we planted actually grow above our heads. So it just needs time. And as we know it with transformation, it just takes time. Here are other pictures of this wonderful project that actually just got opened this year. And with this, I want to give a bit awareness of, we looked at this urban area on the urban scale. We look now at this regional scale with this big project, but also for me it's important to understand that landscape planning works also, of course, directly on the building scale. So also somebody once told me, Michael, are buildings the problem? I said, of course they're a problem, but they can also be a part of the solution. If we add green roofs, green facades, or around the building, we can also do a lot. And here I want to show a project where I was also involved in Vienna. It is the transformation of the Chamber of Labor, actually. It was a building that is existing, and it got transformed from a gravel roof into a zero-slope retention solar green roof system. What a word! So basically, this is a green roof with extremely high water storage potential, and PV modules were even included into the green roof system. So it's absolutely multifunctional. On these 2,000 square meters, 100 cubic meters of water are able to be restored, retented, 50 liter per square meter, and 150 kilowatt peak energy is being able to produce. So for me, this is an absolute light tower project, and I just want to raise the awareness that our profession really is able to work in all the scales, and all of them are equally important. And with this importance, I want to conclude. I want to conclude with our responsibility that we have as a planners. We have a responsibility to observe today's living environments, understand how they came to be, to really understand the genesis, from where do we come, and help shape a future based on the vision of a society where people and nature can live in harmony. So we are not merely designers of spaces, we are agents of a nature-positive transformation. And we in Land say everything starts with the landscape, goes to a development, and in between there is this polarity of architecture and nature. And yeah, with this last slide, I want to show you our credo, landscape is life. And yeah, I'm really thankful and grateful for this opportunity to share some insights on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was a great presentation. Let's go forward to nature. I remember that. And also first life, then buildings. And I think this is a perfect keyword, also the Jan Gehl quote, to introduce our last speaker, Haris Piplas, who will be joining us from Brussels today. Haris, we live in the same city. We know each other for quite a while. And I think it's very funny that today you are at the new European Bauhaus feast in Brussels, which was one of the things we very early on discussed about, I think, in a conference call, that the new European Bauhaus, the initiative taken by our President Ursula von der Leyen to establish the European Green Deal in the anniversary of the Bauhaus, was a moment when we said with some other colleagues, this is where we have to step in now as landscape architects, because we are the ones who can actually unite all these diverging things. And the other thing which I found amazing, first life, then buildings, is that Haris is not only working for IFLA, and as a IFLA delegate of the Swiss Association of Landscape Architects, but also for a large real estate firm, and Drees and Sommer, and they are actually a facility management firm at the beginning. So we often think about, this is a degrading of our buildings, it's just ending up as facility management. But nowadays, even firms that are originally facility managers hire landscape architects to make a basing. So Haris, I think you're a good person to bridge all these roles that we're talking about today. And I'm giving you the floor.
Thanks a lot, dear Daniel. I think you can hear me, everyone, but you cannot see me, I suppose. It just worked half an hour ago when we had our test, but now did something with our cameras. In any case, I'm sending here in the chat. That's the link to my LinkedIn account, so that the audience is assured that there's not some AI bot speaking. There's a real person behind, even though you don't see me. And yeah, happy to connect with you and exchange our thoughts. And we will start with that today. And I remember very well that moment, Daniel, and how we discussed that the other day, and how this whole endeavor started, and realizing how much what we do here is important to the high political entities or continental organizations. And I'm also happy to reflect on that. But also, I have to say here, and I appreciate also the two previous speakers for their very personal and diverse presentations. And mine also going to be personal. I'm going to illustrate a few thoughts and the pathways I have been going through, and partly also having this opportunity to be part of the IFLA climate working group. There is many people behind. I will definitely forget some of them, but I see obviously Tamzin and Carlos, who puts a lot of effort to make this happen. Obviously, you, Daniel, as also Jane and Blake, and it's a great pleasure to be with you and me representing Switzerland within IFLA, the International Federation of Landscape Architects Global and Europe. Back to my profile, I will, as you announced, try to explain how I end up having different hats on as a landscape architect and urban designer and a PhD in architecture. I studied at the different peripheries or different corners of our professional professions and realizing very early on that we need diverse competences to tackle climate, social, economic problems. So these disciplinary boundaries are luckily evaporating slowly, and that urbanism, landscape architecture, engineering are growing together. And if you look into these different master's programs, meanwhile, you see there's even completely new wording and vocabulary used, so beyond these traditional disciplines. So in this sense, I had the pleasure to work and teach at ETH and Stuttgart, University of Applied Sciences, and Munich and Geneva. Also work for as a consultant, urban consultant for UN Habitat. So where I realized the importance of bridging policy and practice. And obviously we'll talk more about my practical work within Dresden Sommer and my project affiliations. I will now share the screen. Thank you for your note, Daniel. You will see also a good 15 to 18 minutes of my slides. If you see them in full screen, just shout something. Maybe you, Daniel.
Yeah, it's loading. Yes, got it.
Yes, very good, very
Got
good.
it.
No camera, but you see my slide. So, yeah. So that was my long intro to contextualize my role here today, and I'm going to talk about inclusive and sustainable neighborhoods. And as many of you, I studied in the 2000s and got my career development in 2010s. And in this sense, we were as professionals somehow placed into this era where geopolitically it was called the end of history, but then climatically and socioeconomically, it became a clear, I'd say, task formulated for us that we need to address these challenges. Is it hyperurbanization? Is it obviously cities and their role in climate change? 70% of greenhouse gas emissions are counted by and for cities. And in this sense, yeah, the cities where the most people live are part of the problem, but obviously part of the solution as the intellectual, economic, social, ecologic, if you want, hotspots and foci of our planet. This is where our knowledge and our economic and political power is located. So it must be a part of the solution. Obviously, this social transformation, we live differently even than 5 years ago. And in this sense, we needed to address that. And in parallel to that, as again, many of you in the audience were exposed to these new movements, and this is the mid-2000s, the ecological and landscape urbanism readers by Harvard Graduate School of Design and primarily Charles Waldheim. And this is where I got inspired that by this formulation that landscapes or that ecology and obviously the humans should be put in the forefront of urban development, planning, transformation. And in this sense, the big question was how to make it, how to do it, because then studying landscape architecture and urban design, you got into this sometimes melancholic or kind of almost like the victim mode that, landscape architects are so important, but they are not being considered enough. They're not being heard enough. The other professions, sub-professions, specialization taking away our jobs or taking away our role. And in this sense, I remember this is 20 years ago that it seemed like we had this great opportunity, but obviously great challenges in front of us. And then besides, let's say, academia, there is also more than 15 years ago, you had the European Commission and the European Council finally recognizing the importance of here in this particular sense green infrastructure. It's environmental, social, climate, biodiversity benefits. And then this was for me a proof that we're finally arrived at the instances organization that our relevance is recognized. So we're not these tragical heroes looking for this perfect chance to act, but we are being invited and asked and to not just sit at the table, but also lead the conversation. And this is again back to the conversation Daniel, you and me had on why does now the European Commission or the United Nations call landscape architects to support? And I also have the pleasure to be at this World Economic Forum expert meetings with Andreas Kipar. And this is exactly where the very important voices of our profession, like Andreas, are very important to communicate this fact that we are protagonists that have to be considered. And I allowed myself also to add a slide. I don't look like that anymore. This is 15 years ago. You will see in my LinkedIn profile. But this was also our modest contribution back then as activists of IFLA Europe, the International Federation of Landscape Architects, where we started putting together a journal that looks into different topics that are important, like adaptive capacity of cities, etc., 15 years ago, and trying to reach out and trying to make us or ourselves in our profession and our umbrella organization IFLA visible and be part of this discourse. And now, obviously, working now in urban and landscape practice, and like many of you realize how much still the neighborhood development and urban development is carried out in a fragmented manner. So we have obviously fragmented procurement processes. We have fragmented organizational procedures and silos within our not just city governments, but also universities and companies. So in this sense, we need to change that. We have to defragment that. And this is what brought me to this large organization, large planning, engineering, and consultancy office called Dresden Sommer, which has 7,000 employees. And together with maybe similar organization, probably you heard about Arup or Ramboll or Arcadis or ACOM. Those organizations are quite positioned to work in a transdisciplinary way. And this is what my role is within Dresden Sommer as Director of Integrated Urban Solutions, to really cross-connect, cross-pollinate different expertise. Is it water, engineering, energy, mobility, digital aspects, to curate this into real project solutions. And of course, we're not able, or we should not be part of generic solution, but everything should be human-centered and specific. And in this sense, we should not be playing the rational, the technical, the consequent against the emotionally inspiring, social, atmospheric. We have to use both of our brain halves. And we have to do that from the early to the later phases. And that's back to what you mentioned, Daniel. So I'm mostly located with my service as a planner in this earlier phases. You see it on the left-hand side in planning and design, but obviously now being part of our planning office, I have the opportunity also to work in implementation of projects. So in this sense, jumping from the early to the later phases, it's also ensures knowledge transfer across the project lifetime. And very, very important, before I really give you a last impressions from the project landscape, here is a overview of another aspect we must do. This is to cross-connect different protagonists with our economy, basically, with our society. So we have to put together private sector, public, the NGO together. So triple, quadruple, quintuple helix. And very often those logos, the people who work in this organization representing logos, are fighting each other or ignoring each other or many things, but they're often not collaborating or co-creating. And that's something that Within our projects, we have this opportunity to put them together because most of them are our clients or our partners. And in this sense, very important also to be part of, and this, I think many here in the room, we have to shape the discourse. It's not going to just fall from the sky and be served on a silver plate. We have to reach out. We have to work with the UN agencies. We have to work on the city governments and make and also play, if you want, in a playful way. With all these buzzwords that are now arriving that deal with urban and landscape planning, like the 15-minute city, the smart city, and all the other cityisms, we need to get engaged. And this is what part of my agency is about, to really not just shape the discourse, but make sure that this transdisciplinary and holistic approaches are being procured, being tendered out that way, and not that we do it separately. The landscape design separate from the architecture, from mobility and other layers in the city. And this is what helps us. What helps us is the new platform, like the new European Bauhaus. This is basically European Commission's arm that is supposed to collect or to gather us, design and build environment professionals to help implement the Green New Deal of and this is if I know there are many non-Europeans here in the room, please look it up online. And this is the largest continental policy in decarbonizing and making our cities and villages greener. And this is the platform that Ms. van der Leyen, who was here yesterday opening the festival, she called us again, called for action, and not just for action, she's also making sure that we have enough knowledge. There is also innovation funding, and that is also communication platforms like these ones, the previous ones that you see, events, competitions, guidelines, fairs, etc., where we participate in order to share knowledge. And this is a very dramatic image, but this is what I took 2 hours ago here in Brussels of the festival that is happening in the Art and History Museum. Whoever is, by the way, in Brussels, please join us at 9 o'clock in the morning. We have a session with IFLA Europe here. And now for the very last few minutes, I will still dive in with you and try to illustrate how this philosophy, theory, thinking plays out in space or in cities, and how I translate it into projects. And one project is in the city of Basel, a city in Switzerland, but with parts of the city functional urban area being located in different countries, in France and in Germany. If you look it up on Google Maps, you will see it's a de facto tri-national urban agglomeration. So it's located inside 3 countries. So you can imagine how difficult it is to govern a city that's located in 3 countries, right? So, and of course, you heard maybe of Basel because of its large pharma giants like Novartis and Roche, who are partly moving out and leaving out these derelict, sort of almost post-apocalyptic urban landscapes. And this is where we have to dive in. And again, some images from my private album. This is, it would be almost too easy to sit down and draft a beautiful urban vision, but who's going to implement that and how? And in a very complex stakeholder setting from 3 countries, NGO, academia, public, private sector, small scale public sector to global corporations like Roche. And this is what sometimes it is about. It's not about sitting in your atelier and drawing and being the creative. It's really going out on the site and going and analyzing, discussing, convincing what transformation should happen. And this creating common narratives is a very, very important process. I think most of us, we're not even paid for that, but it's a very important process. We're paid to draw, but this or whatever, by hand or in CAD softwares. But this is a very important part of the process, is this curatorship and multi-stakeholder discussions. And I won't go do detail into a project because we don't have enough time, but it's another project that in Basel that we realized together with Land, who we heard already today, and another colleague from ASTOC, really trying to develop this sort of large-scale landscape urbanism for the last landscape reserve of the city of Basel, and also, as the previous speaker mentioned, look into not what you see here, how we can create additional jobs and activate and and harvest ecosystem services, but also how we can bring that into implementation. We're regenerating the Rhine banks. The Rhine, one of the largest rivers in Europe, is flowing through Basel, and how it really can make use of regenerative microagriculture, how this different micro-urban governance models like allotment garden rethinking can be used, how you see a very particular railway infrastructure can be reused, etc., etc. Again, not going too much into details, happy to reflect on another occasion. Now moving to the second last urban, I'd say, laboratory is Berlin. Berlin, the capital of Germany. This is a very specific situation, but not that specific for Berlin, a city that has been entirely destroyed if in the Second World War, and what grew out of this deurbanization, if you want, is this fragmented cityscape. So you have this remaining buildings like this late 19th century church, and then being placed in this, let's say, it's not a collage, it's a real image in this large scale grand ensembles of housing from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And what it was almost tragical was that the transformation of these large scale neighborhoods or thinking of it has not been done in this holistic way. So there is the facility management, and there is mobility and traffic planning, and there is architectural design, and there is, but not a holistic approach. And this is where I went with my team, and having a team of landscape architects, mobility planners, energy engineers, etc. We tried to marry these very confronting images or visions what this place should be. So we have to construct new housing units. There's a housing crisis in Berlin, but we have to preserve green space. We need to create a car-free or car-poor, as we say in German, neighborhood in a neighborhood that has been planned in the most car-centric way in history of urbanism, like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, this project, a very modernist, car-oriented way. And we managed to do that to create 3,500 square meters of new green space and also 717 new housing units. So if you think of places in a holistic way, if you do a sufficient analysis that you see on the right-hand side, understand different layers, the human layer, the physical layer, etc., it is possible to transform places in a meaningful way. And this is an ongoing project, as projects that go on for years. We saw the Raggi Verdi in Milan, a project that goes on for 35 years. And this is again some new typologies that we needed to think about. For example, that mobility hubs are not just mobility infrastructure, but also cultural and social spaces, etc., etc. And that even these non-spaces on the right-hand side can be transformed into something meaningful, and literal placemaking can happen even on a smaller scale. It does not have to be this large-scale typological transformation. And finally, by the way, the Swiss and the German cases I know quite well, as I lived also in this city. So I'm showing you here places where I also lived and worked. And I also worked and lived in Ukraine and in Bosnia, and had also a part of my life spent in Sarajevo, a city that looked like that. Its modern cityscape has been completely deurbanized and destroyed in the war in the 1990s. And in this sense, how to work in such places. And again, for the non-European audience, I'm showing you here different corners of Europe, right? Northeast Europe, Southwest, and Western Europe. And then to illustrate you what type of challenges do we have in our continent. And in this sense, how to work in such places with trauma. And the least amount of people is interested in beautiful designs, but after the war, this was immediate reparation measures to some human reconciliation. You see here on the right-hand side, on the upper part, this is a former front line. Basically, you see here the front line, right? You see the barricades, and this is just like up a river, a few hundred meters, trying to create a public space or proposing a public space at the former no man's land between two front lines, three urban front lines of two opposing war parties. and to curate this interest you see on the right bottom side. This was basically the most difficult part. The easiest part was to synthesize everything, put it down on paper, and draw it up. And the most difficult part was to understand and curate and bring all the different relevant stakeholders together. And in this sense, to regenerate or revitalize the city. And it's again images from the private album that I'm not romanticizing about this participatory co-creation processes, but they're very important, not just to make everybody happy because this is a mission impossible, but they're very important to inform, to co-create, and also to, if you want to save resources, because we see many projects in Europe failing not because of lack of money or lack of talented landscape architects or architects. It's they fail because of lack of support, public support, and that's something, a process that you see here, different ways of co-creating is a larger or in smaller groups, different methods. It's a collage of different project phases. Many of these conversations are not pleasant, as you see here in the middle, where I have to let's say defend some ideas in front of a quite critical stakeholder. So whoever does that knows that this is not an easy ride, but we must do that. We have to really understand our city's laboratories and dive in and understand the resources, the ecological, social, economic resources, and activate them together with the relevant stakeholders, relevant people, relevant organizations. And to close my presentation, and again, we have another tragic situation in the very far east part of Europe, again in the Bucha region, where a lot of infrastructural damage and human massacres unfortunately occurred. And trying now to bring this interdisciplinary or an inclusive approach to here. I have been active for more than a decade in Ukraine. Also here collaborating with the National Union of Architects, and again to bring let's say the professions, and also to bring different voices together, and also learn lessons and teach lessons together in what mistakes can be, let's say, avoided in urban regeneration and urban reconstruction. And whoever's interested in more of this part of my work, feel free to scan the QR code. And some of it has been published in New York Times Magazine. And otherwise, yeah, happy to start a conversation with you and give the word back to Daniel with that. Thank you for the attention.
Thanks very much, Haris, for this splendid presentation, and also for asking all these questions. I'll ask all the speakers please to put on the camera so we can have the discussion. I would like also the audience to invite you to send some questions via the chat. While this is going on, I'll ask the first question, and something which has been striking us, I think, Haris, you and me, when we both joined this global initiative of IFLA, the IFLA Climate Action Group, is that we have quite some institutional power in Europe. We have a lot of things going on. You mentioned some of them: the new European Bauhaus, the Green Deal. We have the WEF also forcing. We have Greta, we have Johan Rockström, who's actually working in Potsdam now, where Andreas, I think, is tomorrow, with the Baukultur initiative. This is also connected to the new European Bauhaus. And we have actually, as opposed to many parts of this world, not as many problems as other parts of the world concerning climate. So my question to you is, how do we bridge this gap, and what can we do to engage in a global sense, and without, of course, falling back into some other terrible things that Europe brought to the world, like colonialism and which actually we're also the root cause of the problem. So how do we deal with that as Europeans and as global citizens?
Is it a question for me?
For all of you. for all of you. But you can take the first lead because
Yeah.
Haris, go on.
As I now already, I turned myself in also in another device. You can also see me here. Greetings from Brussels. Maybe I just to, and then I'm very much looking forward to what Laura and Michael will say. But you mentioned many of these platforms, right? And we talk about continental policies that sound incredibly abstract and not project specific, right? It's we should make our city sustainable, etc. We need to bridge these different bubbles that exist. So it's the bubble between the strategy and policy, governance, and project. The bubbles or different barriers that are between these traditional disciplinary boundaries. We have to bridge the gap between the different project phases and the knowledge gaps that exist. So there is an incredible amount of knowledge out there, and there is also an incredible fragmentation of it that makes it a bit sad. And the only way is that we need to engage with these different bubbles and not make them burst, but sort of make them cross connect. And I hear it very often about like, what are you doing? What are you doing with this real estate people, or what are you doing with these architects, or why with this? So there's a lot of this sort of a small contested situation which we have to bridge with social and political polarization. Look at European cities. Look at the political and societal polarization, and that's something that we have to avoid by however we can, and that's we can only do with engaging with these different sides, and we can do that best through strategy and project as landscape architects and urban designers.
Anybody else would like to
Maybe
comment on this?
I want to comment on your question, Daniel, that you talked about the fact of how can we act in different places. I don't think there is a formula. There is never a formula to design. I had the opportunity in 2017-18 to work in Malaysia, in Malacca, and it was very compelling for myself. And what I learned from there, for example, that participation is not a technique. It actually comes from the people that were demanding participation because they really had issues that couldn't be tackled with planning, they couldn't be tackled with design, but they could be tackled only to be there and to be listened to. So there's not a formula. The role of the landscape architect is to go on site and to understand the context and to understand the people. So let's start from there, and and everything will come up.
Bellissimo. Very, very nice said, Laura, and also Haris. I agree in both. And maybe to conclude, I think specific knowledge is existing. So the know-how is there, and I think often it's important to have engaged people, as Laura mentioned, to go and talk to the people, have engaged people, to come from the know-how to a do now, to start acting. Yeah.
Very nice. Michael, our momentum maker. I like this title that I found on your LinkedIn profile when Andreas introduced you yesterday. Yes, Laura, I would, while I'm still waiting for questions, sorry if I haven't read one, I would ask you, have you starting maybe to ask a second question. We've been in university pedagogics training a lot to flip the classroom, but I think I never went that far to flip it actually to the youngest generation or the younger generations. And on the other side, of course, this is superbly relevant for the climate question because it is a question about the future, and it's already in the very first Brundtland definition of sustainability. it is our responsibility to the next generations and future generations that we're talking about. So what can we learn from children?
Well, I don't know if there is a learning from children. There is a cross-learning from each of the generation we have been involving with. What was interesting is actually, in my case, that my students were becoming actors of change. And that was very much important for them to feel powerful, to feel agents of change. And this is very true also for the children, because also the children were involved and they were actually becoming teachers of their parents, like we said before. So the fact of being involved, of being useful, of promoting actions instead of always promoting a negative image of the climate transition, I think it's crucial. Because if you project an image that is only negative, it prevents the action. Whereas our goal is actually to tackle it, to transform it. And that's why we have to shift this imagery. And there is this cross-learning, virtuous cycle of knowledge, I would call it. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, very much. I would like to know from from the man here also. How do you organizations do you reflect on that on the youngest generations and empowering them in this epochal crisis we are in?
It's really nice. I yesterday had a workshop. We work for a huge natural park, let's say. It's like 24 municipalities, and we had a workshop to work on their future strategy. Nature and landscape is a big part of them. And then it was a workshop with all the mayors. And someone, they dropped I forgot the name now, but they called it junior rangers. So they want to take young people from the schools and make them rangers in their national park. And I found this such a great idea to start early on. You know, have senior rangers and then the junior rangers. The small kids run around and they say, hey, this is our nature, protected. I loved it. And this was part of the daily work yesterday in the workshop. And it connects very well to what Laura just said, because there's also this educational aspect of our work to raise awareness of the importance.
So I'm trying to pull together a sentiment from our chat. I have keywords like our main problems are detachment from nature, but also that we have to, Helen, thank you very much for that, that we have to bring back a sense of wonder and curiosity that pushes the envelope. And I just a few days ago, I watched a presentation about the re-edition of Geoffrey Jellicoe's The Landscape of Man, which really struck me that this book, which is 100 years old and now re-edited and has connections to the founding of IFLA by Jellicoe, is also working in these categories of absolute amazement to our relationship with nature, but also that landscape is clearly a human mental construction, which Tim Richardson, his new editor, even compared to the collective unconscious that was defined by C.G. Jung, not working actually quite close to here in Zurich and down there in Küsnacht. So I was wondering about that. Did you all of you in your challenging the climate question, the biodiversity question, to these huge crises that we are with our profession, did you develop some kind of spirituality? Is there something spiritual that might help us in this situation?
Probably it's my turn, but it's a very unexpected question, but a very important one. I think we need to be in a way. I'm not now going to definition of spirituality, but I think we have to. Um, I mean, I would say there are two levels of spirituality. I see there's this sort of, I know, be a little bit provocative, this pseudo kind of philosophical type of, as we call in German, Planer Prosa. So this is this sort of language of planners and designers, and everything is somehow, it's just like a philosophical way of describing your project, or like the glass facade is dancing with the old town, etc. And then there's the real, genuine respect to the I would say the local, this genius loci, and also all its social, ecological, and other layers, and uncovering them and activate them. Is it ecosystem services, or is it local materials, or is it the knowledge, indigenous knowledge, or just local knowledge? And that's something that we need to, different generations, right? We need to uncover, and then put into the system, into context, and then utilize it for the better transformation of the particular place. And for that, you have to be a believer. You have to, how to say, trust and like people if you want, and you need to sense and have a certain spiritual connection to the place and to the people. Otherwise, you cannot read it. You're not able to read it, and if you're not able to read it, you not understand it. If you don't understand it, you cannot activate it. If you can activate it, you cannot utilize it. So, for a transformation of a place.
Really great. Closing remarks. We start in order of appearance. Laura, what has this day brought to you, and what's your takeaway?
Oh, well, I don't know. I was reflecting about the spirituality that you raised. The real nature, and so not the third landscape, but second landscape we belong to at the moment. For sure, man had the bond with nature, but this bond was not spiritual. It was also, a bond of fear. Think about the medieval cities. The medieval cities were actually to be defended from what was outside. So we were fearing what was outside, even though there was also something spiritual. And with the Renaissance period, well, the ideal city became all paved. You see it in the paintings, huh? So the ideal city did not have nature inside, did not have any trees, because we wanted to be safe. Now we are in a situation where we are in the opposite side. So everything is paved in the city, probably even outside. And the spiritual bond is something that we long for, or particularly I long for in my life. And sometimes I realize that even people in Padova, in my hometown, they forget that a tree is important. They forget that for a tram light, they prefer to chop the trees. Whereas I want to remind them that if I was that tree, if my eyes were inside that tree, I would think differently. I've been working in the city. I've been planted next to the walkway. And I've been there working in silence, and now you chop me because I'm useless. Well, if we take this perspective, then everything changes. And that's spirituality of the 21st century, I think. So
Thanks
I
very
don't know
much.
if I answered to this question, and
No,
it's
that's
a
great,
Yes, very
Laura.
much. And
ending.
Michael, let's talk about roots then, because
But I need to because I need to contemplate a little bit roots, yeah, and I would need to contemplate a little bit longer on the spiritual aspect. I'm not able to answer this right now because I think it's really nice to think about this longer. But what Laura said with this fear from the past, I see this with the students a lot. There is fear also in the current age. It's even called climate anxiety, you know, and this climate anxiety leads to paralysis. I cannot do anything anymore because I'm paralyzed by fear. And I think in a way it's so great to exchange in this format here because it shows that we are empowered, we can do something. And this idealism is always great to get a direction, but in the end, it's also good to have a sort of pragmatism to get this vision and direction into the soil, get the roots into the soil of the tree to let them grow. And I think it's great to see all these projects, and I think just along this format, and I took this for myself, it's such a big multiplicator to spread this around in the world. So thank you really to all people involved in this, all the participants, also from my side, to be able to be part of this.
Okay, Haris, do you want a closing remark?
My closing remark will be that as soon as we finish here, I jump back to action. This was also action, but I jump back to these different little bubbles that are like flowing around Brussels, that call themselves different names, and then we try to, let's say, have a common ground. Also, during this conversation evening in Brussels, there is also a reception tonight. So let's continue communicating, conversating, and exchanging. And again, thanks to the IFLA Climate Group for the hard work, and everyone for listening to us, and looking forward to expand our exchanges.
Thanks very much. I'm sorry I couldn't take any question from the audience. Though you can ask your questions at the next seminar where we'll be traveling to the Middle East. Some of the speakers, every time I meet them, I asked how is it going, and it's really a serious question because this is our newest next war zone, unfortunately. But IFLA is a global organization, and I can also assure you that since I've been working with IFLA, I've seen the global politics from very, very many angles, and that's a super interesting part of IFLA too. I'd finish with a slide from my working place for the next few months, at least from Versailles. And as you can note, Versailles looks exactly like the IFLA logo, and this is no coincidence. It's also the address. This is the Potager du Roi in Versailles. Our school has its 50th anniversary this year, and that's just a little side note, but I'm very happy to have this also as a party, inviting everybody, maybe this year, maybe next year. If you come to Paris, don't miss the Potager du Roi, and don't miss to visit the heart of IFLA and its postal address. Thanks very much. There will be other webinars in a rhythm of week. So after Middle East, we go to the youth webinar and a global summary webinar. And I can also, in gratitude to all our speakers, tell you that we're already on a mission to be present with a summary of these webinars at the next COP in Turkey, COP 31, if I'm not, the Convention of Partners of the IPCC. And also it's going to be summed up at the IFLA World Conference in Hong Kong in November. So this year has been really a great year for climate in IFLA. I think we've created a lot of momentum, and I'm very happy to also have the European perspective on this. And all of these webinars will be collected on YouTube and disseminated via the IFLA homepage. Thank you very much. And Haris, go to the party and cheerio to our president. Thanks.
Not a party, it's a collegial exchange.
Okay.
With music. Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much. And thank you everybody for listening. I'm sorry we couldn't make this more interactive. That's a technical thing. And also we host it in the other side of the world. But I hope next time ask you questions a bit earlier that we can still react. Thanks. Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Aris. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you both. Bye.